audience and the speakers and participants of today's forum. Especially I'd like to thank Dr. Ali Chima for hosting this wonderful event. Ahmed, I'm a big fan of your work already, and thank you for partnering with LUMS for this really important topic. I'm not an economist or a political scientist. I work in the healthcare space. But I can give an example from that space that will highlight how important today's discussion is. So Pakistan, as you may know, is now the global capital for viral hepatitis. There are more people living with hepatitis C in Pakistan than any other country in the world. And this is despite the fact that we have a cure for the disease. It takes only 12 weeks. And Pakistan has the cheapest cost of cure on the planet. We make the cure in Pakistan. It's 98% effective. But the only reason we've not been able to address this challenge of hepatitis C, and every year the patient numbers keep growing. We now have 15 million people with hep C in Pakistan. The only reason why we're not able to tackle this challenge is that there is no effective local response at the primary or community level. Patients with hepatitis C, it's a silent disease. They need to be found, diagnosed, and put on treatment where they live. And the fact that we don't have a functional local government system or a local healthcare system is at the heart of so many of our challenges and problems. And any functioning democracy cannot function without effective local government. So I'm especially grateful for today's speakers who came all the way. Dr. Sania, thank you for coming all the way from Islamabad. Everyone else who's here. We hope as a university, I think, universities are very important convening spaces for functioning countries. And we hope as LUMS to be able to convene the best minds, as you will see today, on the most sort of important grand challenges that this country faces. And we hope in that way to contribute in developing homegrown solutions that are evidence-based, data-driven, and can ultimately help Pakistan become stronger and more robust. So once again, my thanks to everyone for coming today, and I look forward to the sessions. Thank you.
मैं दहलीज़ की तरफ से आप सबको आज के इस लोकल गवर्नमेंट फोरम पर खुशामदीद कहता हूँ। सबसे पहले तो मैं शुक्रिया अदा करना चाहूँगा लाहौर यूनिवर्सिटी ऑफ मैनेजमेंट साइंसेज के महबूबुल हक रिसर्च सेंटर का और आइडियाज़ पाकिस्तान का कि उन्होंने हमारे साथ इस लोकल गवर्नमेंट फोरम के इनेकाद को मुमकिन बनाया, और बिलखसूस डॉक्टर अली चीमा को जिन्होंने हमेशा लोकल गवर्नमेंट्स की जब भी बात हुई तो उन्होंने सारे काम छोड़कर लोकल गवर्नमेंट को तरजीह दी। सो बहुत शुक्रिया। दहलीज़ के बारे में आई जस्ट से अ फ्यू वर्ड्स। इट्स अ प्लेटफॉर्म फॉर raising awareness around the importance of local governments, local democracy. We also do advocacy with politicians and political parties, and also conduct research on the important areas of reform to create robust local government institutions in the country. Local governments are the bedrock of a democratic society, and unfortunately in Pakistan, this tier of government has been struggling since independence. ये ना सिर्फ जमहूरियत की सेहत के लिए इम्पॉर्टेंट इदारे होते हैं, बल्कि आज की दुनिया में जब अर्बनाइजेशन का दौर है और दुनिया पूरी जो है वो शहरों के इर्द गिर्द तरक्की कर रही है, पूरी दुनिया को क्लाइमेट चेंज जैसे एक बहुत एग्जिस्टेंशियल थ्रेट का सामना है, और आज जब हम पाकिस्तान में मईशत एक माशी बहरान से गुज़र रहे हैं और हम ये सोच रहे हैं कि पाकिस्तान के सियासी और मुआशी जो बहरान हैं उन्हें कैसे हल किया जाए, तो मेरा ख़्याल है कि लोकल गवर्नमेंट्स इन तमाम पहलुओं से अगर देखा जाए तो बहुत अहम है। और शायद पाकिस्तान के जो सोशल, पॉलिटिकल और इकोनॉमिक चैलेंजेस हैं उनका रास्ता मजबूत मुकामी हुकूमतों से होकर गुज़रता है। बदकिस्मती से पिछले 70-75 साल की अगर तारीख़ पर नज़र दौड़ाएं इस मुल्क में, तो हमें नज़र ये आता है कि यहाँ पर एक ताकत के हवाले से सेंट्रलाइजिंग टेंडेंसी है, और हम ताकत में जो طاقت کو شیئر نہیں کرتے یا اس میں مزید شریک نہیں بناتے یا اس کو نچلی سطح تک نہیں لے کے جاتے. 60 سال لگے ایک مضبوط وفاق کو، ایک صوبوں کو اختیارات دینے میں. وفاقی حکومت پہلے بہت مضبوط ہوتی تھی، اور اب شاید وقت آ گیا ہے کہ صوبے جو ہیں وہ اختیارات جو ہیں وہ مقامی سطح تک منتقل کریں. آج سے 14 سال پہلے 18ویں ترمیم کی شکل میں ایک بہت بڑی پاکستان میں ایک کانسٹیٹیوشنل ریفارم ہوا، جس کے بعد پاکستان کی جو ریاست ہے اس کا نقشہ بدل گیا اور صوبوں کو خود مختاری دی گئی. یہ 18ویں ترمیم جو ہے یہ ایک میثاق جمہوریت کا نتیجہ تھا، جس میں پاکستان کی بڑی سیاسی جماعتوں نے یہ وعدہ کیا یا فیصلہ کیا کہ اب ہم اختیارات جو ہیں وہ صوبوں تک اور لوگوں تک لے کر جائیں گے. اس میں چارٹر آف ڈیموکریسی میں لکھا ہوا ہے کہ گراس روٹ لیول پر امپاورمنٹ ہوگی. لیکن بدقسمتی سے پچھلے 14 سال میں صوبے مقامی حکومتوں کو مضبوط نہیں کر پائے. اور میں صرف کچھ آخری بات کروں گا کہ پچھلے 14 سال میں پنجاب میں صرف 2 سال، سندھ میں 6 سال، کے پی میں 4 سال، بلوچستان میں 5 سال، اور جو اسلامی جمہوریہ پاکستان کا جو دارالخلافہ ہے اسلام آباد، وہاں پہ 2 سے 3 سال مقامی حکومتیں رہیں اور تقریباً مفلوج حالت میں رہیں. تو آج ہم امید کرتے ہیں کہ جو 4 پینلز ہم نے ڈیسائیڈ آج سیشنز میں جو گفتگو ہوگی، اس میں جو لوکل گورنمنٹس کے حوالے سے جو اہم تھیمز ہیں، 4 امپورٹنٹ تھیمز ہیں، اس کے حوالے سے بحث ہوگی، تاکہ آنے والے دنوں میں اور سالوں میں اگر لوکل گورنمنٹ ریفارم ہوتا ہے تو یہ بحث جو ہے وہ اس کو انفارم کر سکے. پہلا پینل جو ہے وہ اسٹرکچر اینڈ فنکشنز آف لوکل گورنمنٹ پہ ہوگا. دوسرا لوکل گورنمنٹس کی ٹیکسیشن اور فسکل سائڈ پر ہوگا. لوکل گورنمنٹس ایک بہت جب تک ویل فنڈڈ لوکل گورنمنٹس نہیں ہوں گی تو وہ سروس ڈلیوری اس طرح پرفارم نہیں کر سکیں گی. تیسرا ٹاپک جو بڑا اہم ہے اور اکثر اگنور ہوتا ہے وہ ایڈمنسٹریٹو سائڈ ہے لوکل گورنمنٹس کی، اور وہ جب تک پاکستان اپنی سول سروس کو ریفارم نہیں کرتی، ہم آج تک اسی سول سروس کو لے کر چل رہے ہیں جو انگریز راج نے ہمیں دیا تھا. اور چوتھا اور بہت اہم جو پینل ہے، ٹاپک ہے، وہ انکلوژن پر ہے کہ کیسے یہ ادارے جو ہیں یہ معاشرے میں برابری لے کر آ سکتے ہیں اور جو معاشرے کے جو ولنریبل گروپس ہیں ان کو کیسے میننگ فل ریپرزنٹیشن دے سکتے ہیں. اور آخر میں آج کی اس فورم کا اختتام جو ہے وہ جسٹس منصور علی شاہ صاحب سپریم کورٹ کے جج ہیں، اور لوکل گورنمنٹ کے حوالے سے ان کی بہت اہم کنٹریبیوشن جو ہے وہ عمرانہ ٹوانا ججمنٹ ہے. ان سے بھی آج ہم ان کے خیالات سے مستفید ہوں گے. بہت بہت شکریہ.
میں آپ سب کو ویلکم کرنا چاہتا ہوں لمس کے بہاف پہ، آئیڈیاز کے بہاف پہ. یہ ڈائلاگ ایک ایسے مومنٹ پہ ہو رہا ہے ان آ ہسٹری کہ جہاں پہ دیر از این ایمرجنٹ کنسنسس اباؤٹ دی امپورٹنس آف لوکل گورنمنٹس. ابھی تمام پولیٹیکل پارٹیز، پارٹس آف دا جوڈیشری، دا میڈیا، ایوری بڈی ہیز اے کنسنسس کہ یہ بہت امپورٹنٹ ریفارم ہے، اور اگر نیشنل ٹرانسفارمیشن ہونی ہے تو وہ اس ریفارم کے بغیر نہیں ہو سکتی. اگر آپ اس پچھلی 20 سال پہلے جاتے تو چیزیں ایسی نہیں تھیں. اس وقت نیریٹو لوکل گورنمنٹس کا یہ تھا، اور وہ سچ بھی تھا، کہ لوکل گورنمنٹس کو ملٹری رجیمز تشکیل دیتی تھیں، اور اس کے بعد یہ ہم نے اپنی آنکھوں سے دیکھا کہ جب سویلین پولیٹیکل پارٹیز آتی تھیں تو وہ اس نظام کو ڈسمینٹل کر دیتی تھیں. تو ایک طرح دس از اے لیپ فارورڈ کہ آج ہم سارے بیٹھے ہیں اور ساروں میں کنسنسس ہے کہ آگے بڑھنا چاہیے. لیکن ڈسپائٹ دس کنسنسس جو ڈیٹیل ہے لوکل گورنمنٹ میں اس میں بہت زیادہ اختلاف. اور لوکل گورنمنٹ ایک امیزنگ چیز ہے بیکاز یہ ایک وہ جانور ہے جو ہاتھی بھی ہو سکتا ہے اور بلی بھی ہو سکتا ہے اور چوہا بھی ہو سکتا ہے. پاکستان میں جیسے احمد نے کہا شاید چوہا ہے اس وقت جس کی دم سے لوگ اس کو پکڑ لیتے ہیں. تو یہ کس جانور کو ہم نے ادھر بنانا ہے یہ ایک بحث ہے. اور وہ بحث جو ہے اوپر سے تو لگتا ہے کنسنسس ہے بٹ اس کی بہت ڈس ایگریمنٹس. پنجاب میں 2013 سے پچھلے 10 سال میں 3 ایکٹس آئے اور تینوں ایکٹس میں بہت فنڈامنٹل ڈفرینسز ہیں. کے پی اور پنجاب کے ایکٹس میں بہت فنڈامنٹل ڈفرینسز ہیں. سندھ کے پی کے اور پنجاب کے ایکٹس میں بہت فنڈامنٹل ڈفرینسز. سو یہ لوکل گورنمنٹ کرے گی کیا ڈپینڈس کہ اس کی ڈیٹیل کیا ہوگی. اور میرے لحاظ سے یہ جو کنسنسس ہے اس کی ایک شارٹ کمنگ بھی ہے. اور وہ شارٹ کمنگ یہ ہے کہ ہر آدمی لوکل گورنمنٹ کو ٹک کروانا چاہتا ہے بٹ یہ بات نہیں کرنا چاہتا ہے کہ یہ جانور ہم نے کیا بنا. سو یہ جو ڈائلاگ ہے جس میں ایک بہت اچھی بات ہوئی کہ مختلف تنظیمیں اکٹھی ملیں اور انہوں نے کہا کہ ہم اس چیز کی شروعات کریں کہ یہ ڈائلاگ ہو نہ صرف یہاں بٹ ہم چاہیں گے کہ مختلف شہروں میں ہو اور یہ ایک پلیٹ فارم ہو جس پہ اور لوگ بھی جوائن کر کے اس کو آگے بڑھا سکیں اس بات کو. لیکن وہ جو بات آگے بڑھانی ہے وہ یہ ہے کہ لوکل گورنمنٹ کی ڈیٹیل ہونی کیا چاہیے. اور جیسے احمد نے کہا کہ پرٹیکولرلی ان 4 ڈفرینٹ ایلیمنٹس. 1 از کہ اسٹرکچر آف فنکشنز کیا ہونے چاہیے, اس پہ بھی بہت بڑی ڈس ایگریمنٹ ہے. اور دوسری یہ بات ہے کہ فسکل اور فائنینشیل سسٹم کیا ہونا چاہیے, اس پہ تو پاکستان میں کوئی بات کر ہی نہیں رہا. دیر از نو ڈبیٹ کہ اس کا فسکل اور فاؤنڈیشنل بیس کیا ہونی چاہیے. سول سروس ریفارم جو ہے وہ ایکچولی تمام لاز سے مسنگ ہے. تو اگر ہمیں ایک کنسنسس نظر آتا ہے تمام ایکٹس میں وہ یہ ہے کہ سول سروس یا ہیومن ریسورس کے اوپر جو پاور ہے وہ بیوروکریسی میں رہے گی, وہ لوکل گورنمنٹس کے پاس نہیں جائے گی. بٹ کیا یہ ایسے ہونا چاہیے یا لوکل گورنمنٹس کو میننگ فل ہیومن ریسورس ڈیولوشن بھی چاہیے. اور چوتھی یہ بات ہے کہ یہ کافی عرصے سے یہ بات رہی ہے کہ لوکل گورنمنٹس کوڈ بی پلیٹ فارمز آف انکلوژن. جو ایکسکلوڈیڈ گروپس ہیں ان کی آپ امپاورمنٹ اور ریپرزنٹیشن کافی لارج اسکیل پہ بڑھا سکتے ہیں اگر آپ اس کو ٹھیک طرح استعمال کریں. بھائی اس میں بھی بحثیں ہیں. مثلاً 2001 میں جب نظام آیا تو یونین کاؤنسل لیول پہ جو خواتین تھیں جن کی ریزرویشن تقریباً 33% تھی, ان کے جو الیکشن کا نظام تھا وہ ڈائریکٹ الیکشن تھا. جب 2013 آیا اور اس کے بعد تمام لاز آئے تو وہ ریزرویشن جو ہے وہ 33% سے گرتی گرتی 15% پہ چلی گئی, 12% پہ چلی گئی. کے پی میں یونین کاؤنسل لیول یا ولیج کاؤنسل جس کو وہ کہتے ہیں اس میں ڈائریکٹ الیکشن ہی رہا خواتین کی سیٹس کا, لیکن پنجاب اور سندھ میں وہ انڈائریکٹ ہو گیا. اب یہ ڈائریکٹ اور انڈائریکٹ کا سفر جو ہے وہ بہت وسیع سفر ہے اور وہ ہمیں بہت فرق ڈائریکشنز میں لے جاتا ہے, لیکن اس پہ کوئی بحث نہیں. تو ہم آج یہ چاہتے ہیں کہ یہ صرف نہ ہو کہ ہم سارے انگوٹھا لگائیں کہ لوکل گورنمنٹس ہونی چاہیے, بلکہ میں کہتا ہوں بری لوکل گورنمنٹس نہیں ہونی چاہیے. میں اس چیز سے یہ ڈبیٹ شروع کرنا چاہتا ہوں. اور اگر ہونی چاہیے تو پھر میں ان میں ہونا کیا چاہیے. سو یہ اینڈ آئی ہوپ ایوری بڈی پارٹیسپیٹ. دا پینلسٹ آر ہیئر ٹو اسٹارٹ اے کانورسیشن بٹ وی وڈ ویری مچ لائک کہ آڈینس جو ہے وہ اس کانورسیشن کو لے کے چلے. تو میں پھر آپ کو ویلکم کرنا چاہتا ہوں اینڈ آئی تھنک احمد وی کین بگن دا فرسٹ پینل. بٹ یو نیڈ ٹو کنیکٹ آئی تھنک ابیس لگاری صاحب.
I would like to invite the speakers of the first session, institutional design to build representative, accountable and responsive local governments to tackle emerging challenges. We have with us Senator Dr. Sania Nishtar Sahiba. Please, if you could take a seat. former chairman of District Lodhra and chairman of Association for Development of Local Governments in Pakistan, which is the representative body of all local governments in Punjab. Rajan Sultan Pirzada Sahab, we're honored to have you here, sir. The voice of youth, Amar Ali Jan. We have with us Musharraf Zaidi Sahab from Islamabad. Thank you so much for being here with us. And I think we're also joined by Awais Laghari Sahab virtually. Has he joined? Awais Laghari Sahab is the Secretary General of PMLN Punjab and a former MPA, former Federal Minister. He's joining us from abroad. He's traveling and I think he's joining us via Zoom. I would like to hand over the panel to Dr. Abiha Zahra. She is a professor at ITU and she will be, I think, taking the panel forward.
Okay, Assalamu alaikum everyone. I hope we don't delay any further. I think Dr. Ali Cheema has given a wonderful opening to the session and explained the importance of local governments. So ये जो आज का session है, I think this one focuses on structures and functions. Or there are three main points that we are going to reflect on, that are representation, responsiveness, and accountability. So I would like Dr. Sania Nishtar to start, and I would maybe request her to reflect on the structures and functions of the local governments, and especially the bill they have presented in the NA. Dr. Sania, please.
Assalamu alaikum and good morning, everyone. So it's always a pleasure and a privilege to be here at this seat of learning, and I want to thank Ali Cheema for extending me the invitation. And whenever I come to LUMS, I think of Babar Ali Saab and what a wonderful ecosystem he catalyzed, and what an amazing line of succession, which is the mantle is now in your hands, Usman. So thank you for having me at this seat of learning. And thank you, Ali, for catalyzing this very important conversation. So in the public policy space, when we look at things as decision makers, you always look at your first port of call is the Constitution. What does the Constitution say? And what do the laws that emanate from that Constitution stipulate in greater details? How are the rules formulated? What are the regulations like? Who has the mandate to execute? What are the institutional arrangements? What policy you formulate and how you execute it. So this is your line of thinking. As far as local government is concerned, the 18th Amendment inserted Article 140A. And 140A basically stipulated that the local government system is important. That power should be given to the elected representatives at the local level. That laws should be formulated in this regard by the provinces, and that the election commission has a role. But as our anchor, who spoke in very good Urdu, said, that there were huge gaps. I mean, that piece of constitution really meant nothing, because over the ensuing course of years, we saw the delays that happened in holding local government elections, and there really is no accountability for that. In any case, the bulk of what happens at the local government level is in the hands of the MPAs. And I will quote you, Ali, on your, on the comparison of the Hathi and Chua, the elephant and the mouse. The dynamics at the local government level are purely in the hands of the MPAs. and the MNAs who want control of the SDG funds and who want to execute even small schemes such as local drains, laying bricks in a small on a small street. So that notwithstanding, let's come back to the Constitution and how things evolved from there. So there clearly was as a legislator, I thought there was a gap in the way that covenant was framed, Article 140A. So recently, I have moved a constitutional amendment, as part of which I seek to bring greater clarity in when the elections have to be held, if the assembly is dissolved, in how many days should the election be held. I've also tried to elaborate within that constitutional amendment to Article 140A how it is binding on federal and provincial governments to provide funds to the Election Commission, clarity in the role of the Election Commission, and the imperative of the Provincial Finance Commission award. And the addition of the sixth schedule, which stipulates the specific things that are within the purview of the local governments and not the MPAs, not the MNAs. So that is what the spirit behind the amendment to constitutional amendment to 140A is. And just as an aside, I also want to mention that I've also moved and am in the process of moving a number of other constitutional amendments as well, including amendment to Article 84. And that, of course, is another chapter. But coming back to 140A, the amendment has been admitted. It will now go to the respective committee, and we will see what proponents of democracy have to say about this. My sense was that an amendment like that in the House would have resounding support by all parties, and that it would sail through there and then. But that was not the case. In the recent past, excuse me, in the past couple of weeks, you've seen a number of different laws virtually sail through. But unfortunately, this amendment did not, despite the fact that I thought that it was so pro-democracy centered that it would. In any case, it is now in the pipeline. But what I'd really like to stress here, that regardless of the form that you have, it is not the form that's important in its own right. It is how things get executed that are important. We've had these endless discussions on what the local government form should look like, what the respective laws of the provinces should look like, how many provinces should we have in the country, how many ministries should we have in the federal government, in the provincial government. But the actual animal in the room, the actual problem which really undermines government functioning is very different, and that you cannot fix with the form. And the actual problem with government function is that we set up government to actually fail, because we incentivize the wrong things, we do not reward performance, there's absolutely no accountability for whatever you do within the government system, whether it comes to ministers, whether it comes to bureaucrats, there's absolutely no accountability. You can do whatever you like. You're not going to be held to account unless it is for political reasons. And then, of course, corruption and collusion is deeply, deeply entrenched. It is institutionalized. It is the name of the game. We talk about failures of delivery, but delivery in government institutions will fail if no one is benefiting from that. If people are benefiting from that, if there's a whole chain of command that is benefiting from rent seeking and from the pilfered resources that are institutionally shared, then things will happen like a well-oiled engine moves.
Okay, sorry to interrupt, Dr. Sania. We actually have to give 5 minutes to everyone, so I will come back to you, and thank you so much for highlighting that how important it is to execute the plans rather than keep having so many different ones and not execute them properly. I'll move onwards before I come back to all the panelists. I'll move onward to Mr. Musharraf Zaidi, who has been part of National Reconstruction Bureau with Pervez Musharraf Saab, and he also reflects a lot on the role of local governments in larger national economy. So I think he has some slides and he would want to share his comments. And I would request the panelists to please keep 5 minutes for the first round.
Thank you, Dr. Sahiba. 5 मिनट जो है वो तो बहुत चैलेंजिंग होगा मेरे लिए, लेकिन क्योंकि मैं चाह रहा था कि मैं महदूद रखूं अपने ख़यालात का इजहार, तो इसलिए मैंने कुछ स्लाइड्स जो है वो तैयार की थी और वो बहुत जल्द जो है वो इंशाल्लाह हमारे पीछे और आप सबके सामने जो है वो पेश हो जाएंगी. आई थिंक व्हाट आई वांटेड टू डू वाज फर्स्ट टू थैंक अहमद इकबाल एंड दहलीज, दिस फैंटास्टिक न्यू इनिशिएटिव, एंड ऑफ कोर्स अली चीमा, my guru and king, and of course I know that Ideas and USIP are also involved, so it's great that we're having this conversation. People like me, I'm glad you mentioned NRB. I can't say that it's entirely accurate that I was with the person that you named. May God rest his soul in peace. But I was there, and I think मुझे जो पर्सनली एटलीस्ट मुझे ये लगता है कि जो लोग 20-22 साल से इन डिस्कशंस में शामिल हैं, जो आज हालात हैं, और अगर आप 20-25 साल से ये काम कर रहे हैं, तो थोड़ी सी जिम्मेदारी जो है वो मेरे ख्याल है हमारे कंधों पे भी है कि ये what didn't work. If we say that we keep repeating the same thing, then I think part of the analysis has to be, you know, what is it, ये failure कहाँ हुआ है, और without question part of the failure is the people that have been involved. I think the language that we use and the way we think about things and the way we frame things are clearly not working. Part of it, the reason, at least for me, that it doesn't work is that having done this from inside government, having done it with a democratically elected regime, with a military, quasi-military regime, having done it from the side of the donors, having tried to do it from the perspective of the mass media, there's all these different angles from which, you know, many of us have tried to have this conversation. And of course, Mansoor Ali Shah has tried to have it from the position of a judicial, I would say that judgment was judicial activism, but maybe the best form of it rather than the worst form of it. And yet, the outcomes are what they are. And the outcomes are exactly as Dr. Sania Nishtar just said. And whenever, there we go. So let's just go to the second slide real quick.
Should I?
No, please don't. You're much better looking than the slide. So we have, I'm quickly going to go through this, right? You don't have to see everything, I'll run through it. So I want to talk about the importance of purpose, कि ये बात हम क्यों कर रहे हैं, local governments की, what's the point? Is it to satisfy some donors or to satisfy the notional idea of local governments as encapsulated in the Constitution? What does that matter to somebody in Jacobabad or somebody in Miran Shah or somebody in especially Gilgit-Baltistan, जहाँ पे उसका status जो है वही जो है उस पे बड़े सवाल जो है वो पूछता है. फिर ये 3 जो अल्फाज इस्तेमाल हुए हमारे सेशन के टाइटल में, representative, accountable और responsive, इनकी क्या मानी है? So just going quickly through those, and then trying to think of design principles within our context. And that context is, as Dr. Nishtar mentioned, it's very specific and peculiar, and we'll get to that. And then finally, maybe 3 ideas that we can think about. And I don't think those ideas are going to happen, but I think with all the brilliant minds in the room today, and hopefully for the ones that are at university, when you start your 25-year clock, maybe 1 or 2 or 3 of those ideas will help inform much more success for you guys than what at least I can claim to have been able to deliver for you or on your behalf or on my behalf. So if we go to this first why question, कि ये मकसद इसका क्या है local government का. So we go to the next slide real quick. Basically मकसद लोगों की ज़िंदगियाँ बेहतर करना है, और अगर ये मकसद नहीं है तो we should not have this conversation, because nobody is interested in a conversation about local government if it can't show clearly how it's going to make people's lives better. And in that regard, there are 3 kind of core principles or values जो मुझे लगती हैं कि बहुत अहम है. सबसे पहली equity है, कि जो एक ज़िले में या एक तहसील में या एक यूनियन काउंसिल में जो सबसे कमज़ोर और बेबस शख्स है या इंसान है, उसकी जो sense of अहमियत है या the idea of I think in Gen Z it's about being seen, that person should be seen, that she or he is seen in the same way that the most powerful and least vulnerable person in that jurisdiction is seen. Now that's an ideal state, but we need to state the ideal state before we start making compromises कि देखें ये तो नहीं हो सकता, हमारी society में मेल डोमिनेशन है तो औरतों को अपनी जगह में रहना वो सारे वो मतलब वी कैन हैव दैट कन्वर्सेशन और हमें वो सुननी पड़ेगी, आपको भी सुननी पड़ेगी, आप में से कुछ वो सुना रहे होंगे, कुछ सुन रहे होंगे, बट द पॉइंट इज दैट द प्रिंसिपल शुड बी लेड आउट दैट equity is really important and you can't have better lives if that's not a driving value for how we think about governance. The second principle is prosperity. And we should not be shy about this at all, and this is one of the vital components that's missing in the entire governance conversation in our country. We want to have a better life, you have to have more money. So we want businesses, firms, individuals to have more money. And to have more money, there's certain things that need to be true. So we need to make sure that small and medium businesses, women-owned businesses, minority-owned businesses have access to capital. They don't today, and they have some degree of protection from invasive and parasitic rent seeking and regulatory overbite. And then the final principle or value is competitiveness, that each jurisdiction should feel that by performing better, it will get more. Its people will be happier, and therefore they're interested कि अगली तहसील की हो रहा है, right? And they're questioning that, and they're trying to metric their behavior in a way that can compete with that. Is this what I've already passed? Wow, and I'm only on my second. I can stop, or if you allow me, मैं बहुत तेजी से सारे स्लाइड खत्म कर लेता हूँ, फिर हम बाद में देखें. मैं literally 3 मिनट में अब ये इंशाल्लाह स्लाइड खत्म करूँगा. Let's see कि ज़ैदी साहब जो है वो अगले उस पे चलें. पहला सवाल ये representative क्या है? तो representative की जो definition मैंने शेयर करने की कोशिश की है, स्लाइड चेंज कर लें ताकि लोगों को नज़र भी आए. The individual, the neighborhood, and the community can see, hear, and feel herself, themselves, and itself in local government. So ये नुमाइंदगी का जो element है कि people should see themselves in government. That's what representation or representativeness is. Accountability is, it's easy to say हिसाब देना, but हिसाब किस तरह देना? और ये बहुत simple है. अगले उस पे आ जाएं स्लाइड पे. हिसाब के सिर्फ 2 एलिमेंट्स हैं और कोई कॉम्प्लिकेशन की ज़रूरत नहीं है. लंबे पेपर्स लिखने की पढ़ें ज़रूर, लेकिन you don't have to write long papers or do an RCT to figure this shit out, right? It's very simple. If a decision maker does something that improves equity, improves prosperity, improves competitiveness, they get rewarded. And if they do something that reduces those things, they get punished. So if you have a system जहाँ ये 2 चीज़ें नहीं हो रही, then you can't have accountability. There's no shortcuts around this. And then the third is responsiveness. And that is very simply whenever there's an event or a trend that will cause there to be a decrease or an increase in equity, prosperity, and competitiveness, something happens. A decision maker is forced into action. So they're responding to events or trends. So that's responsiveness. ये 3 चीज़ें ज़रूरी हैं. पाकिस्तान का institutional ecosystem, अगले स्लाइड पे आ जाएं, बल्कि उससे भी अगले स्लाइड पे आ जाएं. Designing for Pakistan's institutional ecosystem is very simple in terms of how I'm going to frame it. It's very hard in terms of reality. First, all norms are malleable and ductile, including our Constitution. Nobody cares what is written in the Constitution, and it does not matter what's written in the Constitution. Now, this is a reality that I am living through for the 4th time in my short life, and that many people in the audience are living through at least the 2nd time in their lives. So, you know, when are we going to learn? So this is a real thing. Neither procedural compliance nor procedural contempt produces outcomes. So अगर ये होता कि local governments बड़ी effective हो जाती एक ऐसे दौर में जहाँ constitution की धज्जियाँ उड़ाई जा रही होती, तो मैं सबसे पहले दौड़ पड़ता उसके पीछे जो धज्जियाँ उड़ा रहा था. मैं कहता good, at least हमें outcomes, हमें ना जब procedural democracy होती है तब वो outcomes मिलती हैं और जब वो नहीं होती तब भी नहीं मिलती. और तीसरा इसका आंसर ये है कि जो enduring institutional actors हैं उनका हमारे एनालिसिस में हिसाब किताब, by this I mean the DMG and PAS in particular, but the provincial management services, the Pakistani military, the intelligence services, and judges. These people are absolutely not accounted for when we think about design. So of course, when they intervene in the system, we don't know what to do. So I think when we think about design, we have to incorporate this. I literally have 2 slides, not even 2, 1 slide. So therefore, we need local governments jahan finances are assured and guaranteed. جس طرح ہم NFC پہ لوگوں کو کاٹنے کو اٹھتے ہیں, اسی طرح PFC پہ بھی ہمارے سینٹیمنٹس کو سینسٹائز ہونا چاہیے. I'm talking about ڈیموکریسی پسند. وہ جو تانا میڈم نے مارا تھا, وہ لوگ جو NFC پہ چیختے ہیں, تو وہ PFC پہ کیوں نہیں چیختے؟ یہ ایک بڑا سوال ہے, ان سے پوچھنا چاہیے that why aren't you as sensitive about the PFC. Second, decision makers have to be accountable within the tier of government that they're in. So if you post a BPS 20 officer as the district commissioner, you will never have accountable government, because his entire life, there's not a single second of his life or her life where they'll be accountable to the tier of government that they're supposed to be serving. And finally, local institutions that formally undergird your local government are necessary. So local institutions need to be connected to the formal design. 3 quick ideas. 1, you need big business ecosystem support, finance, payments, and logistics at the local level. 2, you need to formalize women's labor. Women's labor is unaccounted for. The place to start formalizing it is at local government, and if you do that, you're going to see a GDP impact that's quite substantial potentially. And finally, you have to convert the DC office into the data commissioner. Deputy commissioner office ko aapko data commissioner ke office mein banana padega. Jab tak equity, prosperity aur competitiveness ke metrics ko define nahi kiya jayega, aur purpose of government جو اس لیول پہ ہے, اس کا پرپس ڈیٹا کو کلیکٹ نہیں کرنا ہوگا تاکہ وہ اس ڈیٹا کی بیسس پہ یہ سارے فیصلے کر سکے, تب تک لوگ گورنمنٹ نہیں چلے گی. آئی ایم سو گریٹفل that you indulged me, Dr. Sahiba.
Thank you so much. And also thank you for raising these important points. I would want Rajan Sultan Sahab to reflect on mainly the competitiveness part, because if you look around the world, it's really in fashion or in like something that is actually happening, that cities are in competition with one another. So why not here, since he is leading the local government association and all the provinces are somehow part of it. Please.
جی شکریہ احمد صاحب مجھے اس فورم پہ بلانے کے لیے. لمز ایز اے انسٹیٹیوٹ نو ڈاؤٹ کہ اس کی اسٹینڈنگ اور اس کی افادیت, اور یہ دیکھا جائے کہ آج تک ہمارا سسٹم, لوکل گورنمنٹس کی امپورٹنس ہر فورم پہ بات کی جاتی ہے, لیکن افیکٹولی اس کو ایز اے 3rd tier آف گورنمنٹ, آلدو ہمارا کانسٹیٹیوشن 140A بڑا کلیئرلی بتاتا ہے کہ ایک ڈیوالوڈ گورنمنٹ ہونی چاہیے which should be autonomous in financial terms, it should be autonomous as far as the policies are concerned, financially بھی اس کو autonomous ہونا چاہیے. لیکن یہ چیزیں آپ کو حقیقت میں نظر نہیں آتی. اس کی کیا وجوہات ہیں کہ آج 75 سال بعد بھی ہم اسی ڈیبیٹ کو لے کے چلتے ہیں کہ ہمارا سسٹم کیوں نہیں پرفارم کرتا. پاکستان ایز اے سوسائٹی آج آپ کی 25-26 کروڑ کی آبادی ہے, لیکن اگر ہم اپنے 75 سال کے تاریخ کو دیکھیں تو آج ہم اپنے ہی اس خطے کے اندر, ساؤتھ ایشیا کے اندر بہت پیچھے چلے گئے ہیں. آپ 1960s کی دہائی کو اٹھا کے دیکھیں, پاکستان اگر بہت وائبرنٹ نہیں تھا تو پاکستان بہت بہتر تھا, اکنامکلی ہم ڈیلیور کر رہے تھے. اگر ہم اس وقت کا پر کیپٹا انکم اٹھا کے دیکھیں تو پاکستان کی پر کیپٹا انکم تقریباً $350 کے قریب تھی پر کیپٹا انکم, جبکہ چائنا, ملیشیا جیسے ملک جو آج ہم سے بہت بہتر پرفارم کر رہے ہیں, وہ بھی ہمارے سے پر کیپٹا انکم میں پیچھے تھے. تو یہ ایک ڈیزائنڈ فیلئر کی طرف لے کے جایا جا رہا ہے پاکستان کو. پاکستان کی ایسپریشنز, پاکستان ایز اے نیشن, ہمارے پاس اتنے ہیومن فورس ہے, کیوں نہیں ہم ریزلٹس لے کے آتے؟ وجہ یہ ہے کہ ہمارے اداروں کو پنپنے ہی نہیں دیا گیا, ہمیں ایز اے انسٹیٹیوشن بلڈ اپ نہیں ہونے دیا گیا. اگر ہمارے ادارے بہتر ہوں, ہمارے انڈیویجولز کی خواہشات تو ہو سکتی ہیں کہ ہم بہت بہتر پرفارم کریں, اور میں سمجھتا ہوں کہ ہمارے انڈیویجولز پوری دنیا میں اگر دیکھیں, آپ امریکہ میں دیکھیں, آپ ویسٹرن ورلڈ میں دیکھیں, آپ مڈل ایسٹ میں دیکھیں, تو پاکستانی بہت بہتر پرفارم کرتے ہیں. لیکن ہم اپنے ملک میں آ کے کیوں نہیں ڈیلیور کر پاتے. تو بڑا واضح چیزیں نظر آتی ہیں کہ بائی ڈیزائن اس میں ہماری قومی ذمہ داری بھی ہے. ہم وہ نریٹو آج تک ڈیولپ نہیں کر سکے. لوکل گورنمنٹس آئی تھنک دے آر دا موسٹ وائٹل پارٹ آف ڈیموکریسی. ڈیموکریسیز ایوالو ہی کرتی ہیں لوکل گورنمنٹس کے اوپر. لوکل گورنمنٹس کی اگر آپ اسٹرینتھ دیکھیں, صرف پنجاب کو آپ دیکھیں تو وی ور اباؤٹ 58,000 elected members. The only reason that the previous government, they did not have their enough representation. So with one stroke of the pen, they sent the whole local government back to the point zero. آج ہمارے ساتھ ہمارے اتفاق سے مجھے ابھی پتہ چلا کہ نوازش پیرزادہ صاحب who represented the case of local governments at Lahore High Court level, at Supreme Court, اور الحمدللہ یہ کیس ہم نے جیتا. اور یہ بھی پاکستان کی تاریخ میں پہلا وقت تھا کہ جب لوکل گورنمنٹس کو گھر بھیجا گیا تو ایز اے کلیکٹیو فورم ہم نے اس کو پرسو کیا اور اللہ تعالیٰ نے ہمیں اس میں کامیابی عطا کی. تو انشاءاللہ آنے والے وقت میں لوکل گورنمنٹس اپنا رول ادا کریں گی. یہاں پہ کچھ وجوہات یہ بھی ہیں کہ ہمارے پولیٹیکل پارٹیز بھی ابھی اس طرح میچورلی ایکٹ نہیں کرتی. میں کسی بھی پارٹی کو, چاہے میری اپنی پارٹی ہو چاہے ہماری دوسری پارٹیز ہوں, ہماری پارٹی سم ہاؤ ان کے اندر وہ شائنس کا ایلیمنٹ ہے, وہ شیئر نہیں کرتی پاورز کو. دیکھیں پولیٹیکل سسٹم کا مقصد ہوتا ہے عوام کی بہتری, اور اگر وہ سسٹم جو عوام کی بہتری کی بجائے ان کی کے لیے کمزوری کا باعث بنے تو میرا خیال ہے ہمیں سوچنا چاہیے. ہمیں لوگ الیکٹ کیوں کرتے ہیں کہ ہم لوگوں کی ایسپریشنز کو صحیح طرح ریفلیکٹ کریں, اور ہم دراصل اپنے قوم کی خدمت کرنا چاہتے ہوتے ہیں, لیکن عملاً جو طاقتیں پیچھے اس سسٹم کو چلنے نہیں دیتی, اور اس میں بڑا واضح ہے کہ جس طرح ثانیہ نشتر صاحبہ نے بھی بتایا کہ ہمارے ہاں ڈیپ روٹڈ کرپشن ہے. اب ہمیں اس میں کوئی ذرا بھی ابہام نہیں ہے کہ ہمارے ڈیپ روٹڈ کرپشن, منی, پاور لسٹ, جس کی وجہ سے جو ہمارا مقصد ہے, جو ہماری کرکس ہے سسٹم کو ڈیلیور کرنے کی میسج کے لیے, ہم اس جانب آتے ہی نہیں. ہم اپنی ساری توانائیاں اینٹی صرف کر رہے ہوتے ہیں, کیونکہ ہم دیکھ رہے ہوتے ہیں کہ ہم نے اپنے کس کوریڈور کو خوش کرنا ہے, اور اس میں ہماری بیوروکریسی بھی ذمہ دار ہے. ہماری بیوروکریسی کی اپنی وجوہات ہیں کہ وہ اپنی ہیجمنی کو آج تک کمپرومائز نہیں کرنے دیتے. وہ چونکہ بہت پاورفل جگہوں پہ بیٹھے ہیں, اور اس میں ہمارے, میں سمجھتا ہوں کہ پولیٹیکل لیڈرشپس کی بھی کمزوری ہے کہ ہماری پولیٹیکل لیڈرشپ بھی اپنی ذمہ داری کو اس طرح نہیں نبھاتی جو مینڈیٹ ہمیں پبلک دیتی ہے. اور اسی طرح میں سمجھتا ہوں کہ ہماری آرمی اسٹیبلشمنٹ کو بھی اب چاہیے کہ ہم نے ایز اے نیشن کھڑے ہونا ہے. اگر ہماری انٹیگریٹی آج اب جب بات کرتے ہیں دنیا میں تو ہمارا پاسپورٹ, ہمارا یہ سارا سلسلہ ہماری کیوں نہیں رسپیکٹ ہوتی, کہ ہماری اپنی 75 سال کی کارکردگی اصل وجہ ہے ساری چیزوں کی. تو ہمارے یہ میں سمجھتا ہوں کہ اس طرح کی ڈیبیٹس یہ یقیناً انشاءاللہ پرپزفل ہوں گی. آج یہ نیریٹو بلڈ کرنے کے اندر ہمیں یقیناً اس طرح کی میٹنگز کو بڑا میننگ فل ڈائلاگ لے کر ہر جگہ پر میڈیا کا بھی اس میں بڑا واضح کردار نظر آئے گا کہ یہ نیریٹو پبلک کے اندر اب بلڈ ہوگا. اب دیکھیں کہ ہمارے ہمسایہ ملک جن کی ہم بات کرتے ہیں کہ اگر انہوں نے آج ہمارے نسبت, کیونکہ آپ ہمیشہ کوئی بھی چیز ریلیٹو ٹرمز میں دیکھتے ہیں کہ آپ نے اگر ترقی بھی کی ہے تو ریلیٹو ٹرمز میں, اگر ہمارے ہی ریجن کے اندر ہمارے ہمسائے ملک ہمارے سے بہتر پرفارم کر رہے ہیں تو وجہ کیا ہے؟ صرف ادارے انہوں نے ڈیولپ کیے ہیں. ہمیں بھی اب یہ روش بدلنی پڑے گی, ہمیں اپنے اداروں کو ڈیولپ کرنا ہے. اور لوکل گورنمنٹ نو ڈاؤٹ کہ آئی تھنک اٹ از ون آف دا موسٹ امپورٹنٹ इंस्टीट्यूशन और हमें सब को मिल के इसको स्ट्रेंथन करना होगा. थैंक यू.
Thank you so much for your wonderful comments. I think ये बड़ा एक important aspect जो आपने highlight किया, that's sharing political power, and it is directly linked to accountability. Obviously, जब आप share करते हैं तो you have to really be systematic with the accountability patrons. I would want and request Amar Ali Jan to now reflect. Being part and being the lead star of the political party, new emerging political party, कि आप लोगों का as a new political party, what role can you play at local governments, and how local governments can strengthen new political parties in evolving on the national picture of the politics?
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Biha, and thank you to Ahmed Iqbal, Professor Chima, and the honorable speakers. I think it's interesting that we're talking about the restoration of local governments. I foresee, Ahmed, another event in a few months, which will be titled Restoration of the Parliament in Pakistan. And this is precisely the problem in Pakistan, this deep-rooted uncertainty that we have when it comes to the constitution, when it comes to things that should happen in a regular, normal fashion. We unfortunately are dealing with a lot of distortions in our history, throughout our history. And the phase that we're going through right now, and I wouldn't say it started this month or last year, you can say for a number of years now, we are facing another form of deviation and a distortion from the democratic path in Pakistan. The question for us is, and this has been the question since the inception of Pakistan, can there be the will of the people? Can we exercise the will of the people? That's where the constitution comes in, that's where the parliament comes in, and that's where the local government system comes in as well. If you look at the history of the local governments in Pakistan, and I missed Professor Chima's initial lecture, so perhaps it was discussed there. Even when the local governments were held, it's interesting that the military regimes were often more interested in local governments than the democratic governments. And one would assume that's because the military regimes really wanted to transfer power to the people. Instead, what we now realize is that all elections in Pakistan and local government elections are part of that strategy. It's part of a tactic not to express the will of the people, but to control the will of the people. In the absence of the parliament, you have good local governments. In the presence of the parliament, you don't have local governments, which in both cases, as the speakers have already stated, the attempt is to centralize power in the hands of a few people. It could be the establishment, it could be political parties, it could be MNAs, MPAs, and that's part of the reason why we've not been able to devolve power. And without devolution, as we know, it's difficult to think of a will of the people. If we move forward and look at the crisis right now, I'm going to talk about a little bit about the work we're doing on the ground. We're working with the Action Research Collective, where Dr. Ameem Lutfi from LUMS and Professor Nausheen Zaidi from Punjab University, they've been working on surveys of certain working class areas in Lahore. And right now, one of the biggest scandals in Pakistan should be that a city like Lahore, Takht-e-Lahore, which is supposed to be the center of political power in the country, there are areas where 60% of the water is contaminated. 60%. Water is the biggest killer in this city. Similarly, if you work in working class areas during the summer, summer is hell because of the electricity crisis. One, right now, the electricity bills that have come in, but also the fact that you don't get electricity for 10, 12 hours. There's no water. Right now, the gas shortages are increasing. And yet, there's nobody on the ground who can answer to these people. This is the crisis of representation that Musharraf Saab was talking about. you do not have anyone who's accessible. MPs, MNAs will come to the constituency maybe after 3 years or 5 years. Who are the people who these people can go to once they know that the water that they're using in their homes, in their words, they say, ye wuzu ke bhi qabil nahi hai. And it's a common phrase that you'll hear across Lahore, across Faisalabad, and across major urban centers in Punjab and perhaps the rest of the country. And there's no representation of this crisis. Another problem related to the lack of local governments is directly linked to the question that you've asked. So my time really begins now because I'm going to start answering your question. No, I'm kidding. I'm going to finish soon. It's about the emergence of new political leadership. Look, in Lahore right now, one MNA, one NA seat has about 800,000 voters. It is impossible for any new political entrant to enter politics when that's the scale at which you have to operate. MP is about 200,000. So there are a lot of young people who want to enter politics, who might want to run on new platforms, new political parties, or with new ideas, with new energy, and yet there's a huge barrier for entry because you cannot reach 800,000 people through a new political party. And what that does eventually is that you'll have to either join an old party, an existing party, and there you'll have to compete with people who have familial connections with the leaders of these political parties. So it actually discourages people from entering politics. On the other hand, a local government, a councillor, needs about 400 votes to win. And all politicians, in my humble opinion, should always begin their politics with local government. Because that is where you get the experience of what's happening on the ground. Those are real nurseries. We don't have local governments and we don't have student unions. So we have no way for young people to actually take on political leadership, to take on the responsibility of being elected representatives, and to become part of the democratic process. So I'll just end by saying the largest struggle that we're looking at in the coming months is the question of the representation of the will of the people. Where do we represent and how do we represent the will of the people? We need the democratization of society that requires student unions, that requires local government, and that requires general elections on time so that a new parliament can come in and legislate on the local government and on student unions. So I think the struggle for democracy in Pakistan is an ongoing struggle, and I see it intensifying in the coming months and years. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Amar. Thank you. So we have Awais Lagari Saab with us. Can you hear us?
Yes, ji, Assalamualaikum.
Walaikum
I'm here,
assalam.
I am connected.
Thank
ji,
you
I can
so
hear
much
you.
for joining us. Awais Lagari Saab,
Ji,
can you hear
can
us?
you hear
Ji, ji,
me?
ji. So, being one of the architects of 2022 Act of Local Governments and ex-minister for local governments, I think no one can better reflect on the structures and functions and how they should be organized for more responsive and accountable local governments. I would want you to reflect on that. Thank you.
Well, since the signals are weak, I'm just presuming that you asked me to give my opinion on how the local governments should shape up and what their future should be like and what kind of an
जी जी बिल्कुल ऐसे ही है I think it's with the bad signals of the internet. I would want to go back to Dr. Sania Nishtar and request her to speak a little more about the designing and accountability. आपने पहले बात की that it is more about execution of the plans and clarity on how we design the local governments. So how do you think, while we have a lot of debate on the structures and functions of the local governments and how to design a more accountable local governments?
So, I mean, on design and function and accountability, I think no matter what you design and no matter what you put on paper, the reality on the ground is what you have to appreciate first. And you also have to understand what it will take to fix it. Now, let me give you a personal example. I was drawn into an inquiry. I was made to chair a committee to inquire into a corruption scandal in District Momand. So apparently there was a local government scheme in District Momand where embezzlement had happened and a certain amount of money was expended in a few days, which certainly could not be the case. So there was a Senate inquiry committee. I was asked to chair it, and I was asked to go and to report back on what was happening. So I did a deep dive, and I found out that the person executing the scheme was in cahoots with the person that I don't want to name. And that person who was executing was very adept at it. He knew when the tender would come out, he knew how to game the system, how to navigate P&D at the provincial level. He knew how to, he actually did all the paperwork on behalf of the government. And then somehow the person who was monitoring was also reporting to him. So it seemed like a very well-oiled machine. And we found out that the work was actually never done, and that the money was whisked away. And I also found out that this was not a one-off. This is something that happens all the time. It's just that we stumbled upon that case and that inquiry was initiated. So I kind of dug deeper and deeper and deeper. And what I found out had nothing to do with the Constitution. What I found out had nothing to do with the law. What I found out had nothing to do with the policy. It had to do with the process. And the process had to be streamlined and tweaked. Now, because I worked in the government, I managed a large budget and a large institution, I knew exactly how to pull those strings. So I'd sat the provincial NWFP government down and I said, look, this is what's happening, and I would like you to do three things. I would like you to develop because there's no point in, having a NAB case and going down the punitive route, which by the way happened in its own right. And, I told them we need to do three things. Number one, you need to digitize the process of procurement end to end, and not in a manner where you pay lip service by putting the tenders on the website. So you have to create workflows. So the tender comes, the expressions of interest go online, the minutes of the committee go online, the people processing it are in workflows, the workflows are separated by certain days, every item, every paper gets digitized, and you will minimize collusion to a very large extent. They developed the system, the KPIT board developed the system, they were excellent, they developed the system in a few days. To this day, I have not been able to implement it because there is systemic resistance. The second thing that I insisted on, I said you have to do something very simple. You have officers, I don't know what they call them, but they specialize in geographic information systems. Those officers sit in every office, in every district. they have hardware, they have software, they have access to all the tools. I said, all you have to do is when a scheme is approved, whether it is a check dam or whether it is a nali or whether it is a road or whatever it is, you take a pre-execution picture, you upload it on this portal, and then of course you do your procurements through that digitized route, and when you finish it, you do the post-execution, you take a post-execution picture and you just throw it with its due coordinates. That's all you have to do. You've got patwaris, tahsildars, assistant commissioners, DCs in every district. Even if you're very inefficient, it's going to take you 1 week to do it. 1 year down the line, they made the portal, very well made. They put a few pictures up there just so that they could show it to me in review meetings. But what I asked them to do has not been done. What the committee asked them to do. And they will never do it, because there is a disincentive within the whole system to have that level of transparency, because they know exactly what I was trying to root out. The third thing I told them was also very simple and cost effective. I said, you have a pervasive mechanism of pervasive system where teachers are absentee, where health facilities run ghost operations, and all you have to do is to put a simple biometric machine in all your service delivery outlets and just tie your pay to attendance via the biometric. And you will see that the ghost operations will slowly weed out, people will start coming, and those who don't want to just terminate them. Just terminate them, you can do that. And these three things have not happened because they understood that this woman has operational knowledge. And she's not saying fancy things. She just wants us to do things that will curb corruption. Change of hands of several chief secretaries, several meetings, the whole, the whole jing-bang lot of secretaries sit there. They will not do these three things. These three things will never happen. Unless there is a chief secretary, not a chief minister, a chief secretary who will sit in a delivery unit and get this delivered and monitor it on a daily basis. The point I'm trying to make, Ali, is that yes, I'm the one having moved the constitutional amendment, and yes, it is important because like Musharraf says, the mention of the local government system in the constitution is merely notional. And yes, it might even pass at some point in time. But what happens to all the constitutional covenants where there is crystal clarity? In today's day and age, we see a flagrant violation of those as well. What happens to all the laws which stipulate with great clarity what you need to do on ground, and what about the rules and regulations that we flout on a daily basis? We live in this environment, we operate in this environment. And I have tried in great humility to bring change towards integrity by making these small tweaks that I'm talking about. You know, the dashboards that compel accountability and the processes that you re-engineer and the hardware that you mandate. And it's possible. But people at the helm of affairs have to be committed to integrity. People at the helm of affairs have to be committed to put in those extra hours to get the right things delivered. And I see a lot of decision makers joining the club, because it's a nice happy family, and everybody at the top is making has a piece of the pie, has a pound of flesh. Never mind the domestic worker, never mind the thela wala, never mind the daily wage worker, never mind the orphan. These people do not matter. These people do not matter in our system. I honestly tell you that. There is no dearth of money within the GOP system. There is no dearth of resources. There is no dearth of institutions, and there is also no dearth of good people. I discovered so many good people, but they're sidelined. It's just a small group of rent-seeking individuals who have created connections within the political hierarchy, within the bureaucratic hierarchy, within that world of vendors and ठेकेदार्स, and with the private sector system. And these individuals have held the entire system hostage. I mean, you look at the wheat value chain. It's only structured to benefit a certain number of individuals. You look at the sugar system, and it's only structured to benefit a few individuals. You look at the price control mechanisms that the district government spearheads. It's not difficult to fix things. But if we think that by framing laws and by changing constitutional covenants and by putting a form in place, things are going to change, they're not going to change. You can have 6 provinces, you can have 20 provinces, you can have one form of local government, you can have another 10 forms of local government, you can scale down the ministries from 28 to 10 or take them up to 54. Nothing is going to change. Things will change when people's intentions will change. And when people with good intentions and the right level of understanding will be committed to making delivery happen. Because right now, what gets delivered in this system? What gets delivered in this system? Things happen when people stand to benefit, and those things happen very, very easily.
I think Awais Laghari Saab is back online, so we will. Laghari Saab, aap please continue करें जी.
हाँ जी, अस्सलाम वालेकुम जी. I apologize for the bad signals and for the bad quality of communication, but I'd like to just, I've been in politics for the past 25 years now, and I'm completely convinced that the issues that the people face at the grassroots level, irrespective of whether it's in the urban areas or the rural areas, there is no other way than to have a strong local government system in place to be able to get people the service delivery that they expect from the government, and they have no hope in, by the way, as we speak. And this has to be an effort that has to be understood and taken ownership of both by the political elite of this country and the people who are at the helm of affairs, and also the bureaucratic elite. Ahmed and myself recently in Hamza Shahbaz Sharif's government were involved in drawing up the law of the local government for a couple of months, and we had to face a lot of resistance from the bureaucracy. They did ultimately succumb to whatever we wanted to get approved, and they did help us out in the end. But the fact that that never rolled out was a very big disappointment, and there was a reversal of that law by the Parvez Elahi government ultimately. I remember when President Musharraf had introduced the local government system, my elder brother was the head of a district, and so was Ahmed, I believe, in Narawal. That system in itself was also reversed by the then Chief Minister of Punjab, Parvez Elahi, when he came into power, because it was all about keeping all those powers and authority to themselves and not actually sharing that with people. I do believe that there is enough law in place and there is good enough law in place, but the lack of ownership by the people at the helm of affairs who are still clinging on to that power in the provincial capitals of our country is actually what is most disturbing. If I am correct, the speaker before me was Dr. Nishtar. I just heard her talk of workflows being and the business processes within the government being made more efficient through digitization and IT-enabled tools. I was an IT minister back in 2002, and we authored the revolution in the telecom sector. Wanted to do the same in the IT sector within the government itself. We even made all files electronically approved within the IT ministry, but outside the IT ministry there was no ownership. So the lack of ownership in uh, revolutionary steps that need to be taken is the most important. So the CEO, which is the Prime Minister or the Chief Minister of a province, needs to take complete ownership and needs to have the political will to give up the power and authority that they hold so close to themselves. Unless that is done, there is no hope for a strong local government to be brought in place. And I think we need to maybe initiate a very strong movement across different classes within society and across different professions, like the doctors and the students and the professors and the politicians and everybody else needs to probably join hands to let the people rule and govern themselves at the grassroots level. There would be still enough for the political elite to exercise their powers and authority in. So I think that is most important, and that could be done. I think we do need a constitutional framework which does not exist today. There is no constitutional framework that exists today that ensures the happening of local body elections every 4 years. There are enough gaps and holes within the system and the law that does allow the bureaucracy and the political elite to actually keep us away from those elections. So that constitution amendment is much required, which will make it as difficult as it is to delay the general elections, which are happening right now because of the census issue. But otherwise, it's not easy to be violating the constitution every time, and there is a lot of pressure coming in from political and civil society itself. मेरे ख्याल में it's absolutely important, and also it's completely important to financially strengthen and make independent these local government systems, so that whatever revenue they raise from within their own union councils is made to be spent within those union councils, and nobody can come and take the money away to the provincial capitals as has been happening in the past. And it's not just the NFC. The our inability in the past to actually, in a just and fair manner, to distribute the resources through the Provincial Finance Commission have been a great weakness on our part as political society and as administrators and people who've been involved in the process of governance. So I think these 3 or 4 things need to be actually institutionalized. And as Dr. Nishtar said, it's not just, we can't really be depending on that individual to be at the helm of affairs who has the ownership to probably improve the business processes within the government or to improve the file flow within the different tiers of government. But we also need to bring into place an institutional framework that does not allow work to be done in any other way but that particular way that it should be done in. So that institutionalizing these entire concepts is absolutely critical and important, and there needs to be now a huge amount of social media pressure that needs to be created for all political parties to actually agree to give up the authority and power down to the grassroots level, without which government cannot function anymore. And I would like to go one step beyond. The community organizations need to start taking over the governance of different parts of society. The Aga Khan Rural Support Program and Mr. Shoaib Sultan is a strong believer in that, and he also believes, and I agree with him, that irrespective of how much you increase the number of officers and increase the size of the government, countries like Pakistan and the growing population we have and the issues we have become ungovernable, and communities need to structure themselves and start governing themselves. So if we are going to that extent, the local government system is a bare minimum that we should seriously start with and start implementing. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lagari Saab. I think we will now move to the next part of the panel, which is the interactive part of this session. लेकिन उससे पहले कि हम ऑडियंस की तरफ जाएं, मैं मियाँ नवाज़िश अली पीरज़ादा साहब की मौजूदगी का फ़ायदा उठाना चाहता हूँ. नवाज़िश पीरज़ादा साहब was the counsel for 58,000 local government representatives who were dissolved. उनका मैंडेट चुराया गया था, और एक बहुत फेमस जजमेंट है असद अली ख़ान केस सुप्रीम कोर्ट का, जिसमें कोर्ट ने कहा कि ये जो 3-tiered सिस्टम ऑफ गवर्नमेंट है, इसमें लोकल गवर्नमेंट्स वही राइट्स एंजॉय करती हैं जो फेडरल और प्रोविंशियल गवर्नमेंट्स एंजॉय करती हैं. हम इस वक्त इंस्टीट्यूशनल डिज़ाइन की बात कर रहे हैं, इसके बाद लोकल गवर्नमेंट, म्यूनिसिपल फाइनेंस, टैक्सेशन की बात होगी, इंक्लूजन की बात होगी, लेकिन जो सबसे बुनियादी मसला है लोकल गवर्नमेंट्स का, वो कॉन्टिन्यूटी और कंप्लीशन ऑफ टर्म, इरेगुलरिटी ऑफ इलेक्शंस. जब एक बीज ज़मीन में डालेंगे ही नहीं तो वो फल कैसे देगा? डॉक्टर सानिया निश्तर साहिबा ने एक प्राइवेट मेंबर बिल जमा कराया है, और अगर हम अपने हमसाया मुल्क इंडिया को देखें, वहाँ पर 30 साल पहले एक कॉन्स्टिट्यूशनल अमेंडमेंट की गई थी, लेकिन उसके भी नताइज कोई इतने खातिर खा बहुत इंकरेजिंग नहीं है. आज भी इंडिया में ऐसी स्टेट्स हैं जहाँ पर लोकल गवर्नमेंट इलेक्शंस होते ही नहीं. तो वो जो जिस कॉन्स्टिट्यूशनल रिफॉर्म और प्रोटेक्शन की हम बात कर रहे हैं, नवाज़िश पीरज़ादा साहब, आपके ख्याल में वो किस तरह का होगा? आई वांट टू ब्रिंग यू इनटू दिस डिस्कशन.
Thank you so much for inviting me on this occasion. I was just going through the amendment Dr. Sahiba has proposed. In fact, first of all, the word, when we use the word devolution, when we devolve it on the provincial, I don't believe on that, because it's not a provincial matter. Because once there is a chapter on provincial government in the constitution, and then there is a chapter on federal government in the constitution, I think what we should be proposing, that there should be a detailed chapter on local government. Once we have recognized it constitutionally that it's a third tier of government, and once we have recognized this as a in our judicial decisions that is a third tier of government, then the third tier of government should be in the constitution. It should not be left to the provinces. Now I've been just listening to the discussion over here, that why for about 10-11 years the non-democratic governments had been able to continue with a good governance, whether it was the Ayub Khan Daur, whether it was Ziaul Haq Daur, whether it was General Musharraf's time, because they base their entire governance on the local government. So that means that the local government has been a good tool, because none of the democratic parties have been able to win an election on twice. They always lost the other one. So it's a basic local government. Now what should be the local government? The local government has to be very clear that it should be represented to a certain level of people, and going to the grassroots level. As we have very clarity, but nowadays we don't even have the clarity upon the provincial and the federal government, because at the present time I don't see that we have constitution in its entire effectiveness. We somehow, because I sometimes really it has become a joke that the constitution is silent when it says that 90 days the election should be done, the constitution is silent. Oh, it's not silent. It is very clearly stated it should be in 90 days. And if you are not doing it in 90 days, that means you are violating the constitution. And there are so many articles in the constitution which can be attracted or it can be attributed. But as you're coming back to Dr. Sahiba's amendment, I think we need a proper forum to discuss on the party basis that what we want to do. As I have seen I have contested on the 2013-17 election laws, and the most of the election law has been developed on my judgments, which I have, whether it was the Sagdar case or the case which we had, Asad Ali Khan case and the other cases also. The importance is that we are still somehow, when we are formulating the local government, we are somehow still going around the 1979 laws which were proposed by a dictator. As such. अभी तक आप 1979 के लॉ से बाहर नहीं निकले. आप अपने हमसाये की तरफ नहीं देखते, आप मत देखें. उसने एक कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन, एक पूरा आपको चैप्टर दे दिया है लोकल गवर्नमेंट का, आप उससे कम से कम फायदा तो उठाने की कोशिश करें. आप डॉक्यूमेंट तो करें ना एक चीज को. Until unless you don't document the thing, then how the things are. सिंध वाले क्या कहते हैं? सिंध वालों के पास, मैं being associated with People's Party, we told them that there was a very good law proposed by Shahid Zulfikar Ali Bhutto, but they also did not, or they don't want that law or to be governed in Sindh. They also took the source from 1979 law.
बल्कि कता कलामी की माजरत शहीद मोहतरमा बेनज़ीर भुट्टो ने
जी
जो
मैं उसी तरफ ही आ रहा था जी. अब जो उन्होंने कॉन्सेप्ट दिया था, जो डिस्ट्रिक्ट गवर्नर्स का कॉन्सेप्ट दिया था, वो बहुत, जिसको जनरल मुशर्रफ ने उसको रिफॉर्मुलेट करके उसको नाजिम्स बना दिया, तो वो बड़ा डायनामिक था. उससे आपकी जो प्रोविंशियल, जो आप ज़्यादा प्रोविंसेस मांगते हैं, वो आपकी रिजॉल्व होनी थी. और दूसरी बात ये है कि अब एनएफसी की बात की,
वक्त की किल्लत की वजह से मैं जरा राउंड ऑफ क्वेश्चंस लेना चाहता हूं.
एनएफसी की बात की, एनएफसी आप प्रोविंशियल लेवल पे तो कर लेते हैं. जब आती है प्रोविंसेस की बात, तो वो प्रोविंस की मर्जी है, उसकी चीफ मिनिस्टर की या उसकी कैबिनेट की, कि वो सारा बजट लाहौर में लगा दे, लाहौर के 4 अंडर पासिस में लगा दे, या अब फ्रैंकली स्पीकिंग डिक्टेटरशिप के दौर में ही भावलपुर में काम हुआ है, लोधरा में काम हुआ है, जो दूर दराज के इलाके जितने भी थे, आज हम डेवलपमेंट्स उठा के देख लें, वो सारे उस दौर में हुए, इन दौर में नहीं हुए. तो वी हैव टू सी कि हम कहाँ लैग कर रहे हैं. हमारे यहाँ अभी भी जो है, जो शेयरिंग वाला बात है, वो बिल्कुल ना होने के बराबर. कोई पॉलिटिकल पार्टी नहीं चाहती, वो इसलिए अब करना पड़ता है उनको कि एक मैंडेटरी हो चुका है, अदरवाइज नॉट.
मेरे ख्याल से आपने जो बात की ना कि सारी सियासी जमातों को शायद इकट्ठे होकर कंसेंसस के साथ एक अग्री करना पड़ेगा कि कैसे इस 3rd टियर को फिक्स करना है, शायद वही असल वे फॉरवर्ड है. अच्छा, मैं चाहूँगा कि हम एक राउंड ऑफ क्वेश्चंस कर लें. हमारे पास तकरीबन 10 से 15 मिनट हैं. अपना तारुफ कराइएगा, आपका सवाल किससे है, सवाल को मुख्तसर रखिएगा और कोशिश कीजिएगा कि सवाल ही पूछे. प्लीज़ सर.
डॉक्टर शाजी इन्होंने जो बात की थी उससे रिलेटेड है. मैंने 2009 में इसी यूनिवर्सिटी से ग्रेजुएशन की थी और हम यंग थे, यहाँ पर आइडियाज़ फॉर्म हुए, और हम जब यहाँ से बाहर निकले तो हमने माशरे को स्लिपरी स्लॉप से गिरते हुए देखा. उससे 14-15 साल हो गए और माशरा बहुत स्पीड से नीचे गिरा है और हमारे मसाइल बहुत ज़्यादा हैं, और जो हम बातें करते हैं इन कमरों में, वो हमारी प्रैक्टिकल लाइफ से और बाहर जो दुनिया है 25 करोड़ आवाम की, इतना बड़ा पाकिस्तान है, उससे ममासलत नहीं रखती. ये सारी किताबी बातें मुझे छोटी सी उम्र में समझ आ गई है कि ये किताबी बातें जो हैं ये ममासलत नहीं रखती. हम एक फेल्ड स्टेट बन गए हैं, उसमें हम सब ज़िम्मेदार हैं. मैं भी ज़िम्मेदार हूँ, शायद ये जो सब बैठे हैं इनमें इनका भी कोई रोल है. तो मैं ये कहना ये चाहता हूँ कि क्या हमने इस चीज़ के ऊपर नज़र दौड़ाई है कि जो किताबी बातें हैं ये कैसे इनको हम प्रैक्टिकल बनाएं, कैसे, जैसे डॉक्टर शाजिया शायद नश्तर साहबा ने कहा कि बहुत सी चीज़ें हैं बेसिक बायोमेट्रिक तक इम्प्लीमेंट नहीं हो पा रही, ठीक है. तो डॉक्टर साहिबा भी इक़्तिदार में रहीं, अगर ये नहीं इम्प्लीमेंट करवा पा रही तो क्या हमें फैसला कर लेना चाहिए कि शायद हम ये कर भी कर भी सकते हैं कि नहीं, या बिल्कुल हम इसको छोड़ दें? तो ये इस तरह का मेरा कमेंट है, या इसको सवाल समझ लें। तो अगर डॉक्टर साहिबा इस पर कुछ रिप्लाई कर दें, या कुछ और लोग, हमारे अली जान साहब, आप इस पर कोई बात करें। बहुत शुक्रिया।
सवाल और ले लें? Let's take a couple of more questions. The lady, आप please जी आप पूछिए जी.
Thank you. My name's Aisha Khan and I'm a development economist. My question is that we heard about transparency, accountability, incentivization, etc. What is the role of metrics, of measuring, and the will of the people, of course, and very, very relevant to establishing local government. How do you see the role of metrics, of measuring? I feel that's something that is missing. We talk about we should do this and that, but I don't see anywhere that, okay, this government is starting from here, they've made this progress, or the bureaucracies, starting from here, there's a 5-year plan or a 3-year plan or a 1-year plan, to make that progress, whether it's about, and often I've heard from also political leadership about, we should deliver, we should do that. But I agree with you, it's the will of the people, and also being accountable to the people, the people's voice, and that is missing, and that I think is also a fundamental point. And sorry, I made a comment kar liya, but it's about metrics. That was my question. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Abdullah Khalid. I'm an economics major at LUMS. I wanted to ask Dr. Sania Nistar, she talked about people's intention. How can we get policymakers' intentions to change? Like, how can we get them? How can we get their interest to align with those of the people? And should we pay CSS officers more? That's something people propose. So I'd like an answer to that question. Thank you.
सर मैं तो इस पे ये भी इजाफा करना चाहूँगा, क्या CSS की ज़रूरत है भी कि नहीं?
सबसे पहले मैं आपके सवाल का मुख्तसरन जवाब देना चाहती हूँ। आपने जो फरमाया कि मैं वो इम्प्लीमेंट नहीं कर पाई, तो मैं जो एग्ज़ाम्पल दे रही थी मोहम्मद एजेंसी का, उसमें मेरा रोल एक सेनेट कमेटी चेयर का था. आई वॉज नॉट रिस्पॉन्सिबल फॉर एग्जीक्यूशन, एंड आई वॉज ट्राइंग टू एक्सप्लेन दैट when you're not responsible for execution and you go to a system and you ask them to do these 3 things, because that is what will fix the distortion that they're experiencing, you get a resistance. But yes, when I was in government, in great humility, I'd like to say that I was able to implement a number of different changes which brought a lot of transparency. You would recall the execution of Ehsaas Emergency Cash, जहाँ हमने एक बिल्कुल ही एक रूल बेस्ड प्रोसेस से एग्जीक्यूशन की थी, और उसमें बहुत रेजिस्टेंस आई थी, बहुत ज़्यादा रेजिस्टेंस आई थी कि जी ये इस चीज़ को करने की, ये तो 200 अरब पैसे हैं और इसको इस तरह से नए तरीके से करने की क्या ज़रूरत है, क्योंकि गुज़श्ता अदवार में तो ये जब भी कोई ज़िलज़िला आता है, कोई सैलाब आता है, कोई आफत आती है, तो ये मकामी जो MPAs MNAs हैं उनको पैसे दे दिए जाते हैं और वही अपने सिस्टम के मुताबिक करते हैं. एंड आई सेड नहीं, हमने एक नए तरीके से करना है, एक फुली डिजिटाइज तरीके से करना है. SMS जनरेट होंगे ID कार्ड्स के, वो डेटा एनालिटिक्स को हिट करेंगे, वो फ़िल्टर्स हैं, ये रूल्स हैं, जो उस पर पूरा उतरेगा उसको बैंक्स में भेज के, बैंक ब्रांचेस में भेज के पेमेंट्स 12,000 की होगी. और शदीद उस पर कुछ कैबिनेट कॉलीग्स की रिजर्वेशंस थी, और उस वक्त के जो प्राइम मिनिस्टर थे ही सपोर्टेड मी एंड सेड येस दिस इज़ हाउ वी वर गोइंग टू डू थिंग्स. इट वाज हाईली सक्सेसफुल. सो मैं बताना ये चाह रही थी कि ये चीज़ें हो सकती हैं. But yes, when you recommend to someone, you cannot enforce your will on them. जो दूसरी बात आपने जो आयशा ने कही, yes, metrics are very important, because when you start with the sector strategy, you frame the goals first. Where do you want to be in the next 50 years? And in the government system, you don't set goals for 5 years. You set goals for posterity. Which is why the program that I ran had a goal called Ehsaas 2047, which had a time-bound outcome-based goals. Then we segregated implementation based on 5-year strategies. We were implementing the first 5-year strategy, which had 7 time-bound outcome-based goals. Its execution was measured through a delivery unit, and by the time the government was ousted, the first 5-year strategy executed 80% of its intended targets. I'm not trying to draw attention to my work, I'm just trying to explain that yes, goals are important, and yes, you need to break down strategy-wise and have specific targets for that strategy, but not just targets and goals, you need to have a means of measurements. And those means of measurements have to have clarity with respect to the methods, measures, and instruments.
I support that. That is what I wanted to underscore.
That's
when the progress is measured, that facilitates
Absolutely.
the transparency and the accountability, the will of the people.
I completely agree, and I just want to quickly respond to that question by somebody in some of the last rows about how do you make policymakers' intentions right. Well, you have to start with the basic bare bones. You have to start by implementing conflict of interest instruments. If you're not going to have conflict of interest instruments, and I'm having great difficulty trying to bring to the table a change in the Senate rules which intends to stipulate that every senator, every parliamentarian should sign conflict of interest statements. What are our businesses? As a parliamentarian, what are your businesses? Who do you associate with? If you're getting a speaking fee, who is it from? If you're traveling, who is paying your tickets? Where do you earn your income from? Where does your spouse earn his or her income from? What do your children do? What are your business affiliations? These things are very opaque in the parliamentary system. These things are very opaque in the government system as well. So you start with conflict of interest. And then, of course, when you abide by rules, you see the government rules and regulations are a protection. We have a tendency to violate them. I mean, what is the rationale of appointing a grade 21 as a federal secretary in key ministries? You're opening the doors to bad intentions. So when you do these little things to open the doors for what you want to achieve, you compromise the system. And by conforming to rules, you make sure that you hedge against predatory behaviors.
Okay. Thank you so much, Dr. Sania. If anyone else wants to reflect on these 3 questions, we have last 2 minutes before we wind up. And I'm sorry we cannot take any more questions because the tea is waiting for all of us. So if any of you wants to reflect?
I'll go for 1 minute each.
Could I,
Yeah.
excuse me?
I'll
Make a comment here?
Okay, yeah, that's a good idea. Because, I think ये सवाल जो आपने भी किया है, and even Dr. Nishtar also pointed towards the fact that it's not just about laws, it's about the process. Now, if you're talking about the process, we're talking about power relations. And the power relations are skewed against the people of Pakistan. That's part of the problem. And you have very entrenched interest groups that are actually, now we have a UNDP report that says are taking annual subsidies of $17.4 billion every year from this country, from this extremely poor country. So it's not just about the laws, it's not just about the policies, it's about, when we say it's about the process, what we really are trying to say, it's about building a counter-hegemonic power against those in power. So what we need is actually a grassroots movement against these vested interests. You can go to the Senate, you can go to the Parliament, you can go to the MPAs, you can even meet people in the bureaucracy, and everybody in Pakistan who's in power sounds and seems helpless. So there's some kind of mysterious force that is controlling Pakistan. I've named them many times and have gotten into trouble for that. But it's not just them. It's also generally the entrenched interest groups, which I think they operate both in the domain of the establishment and in the civilian domain. And the problem that Pakistan, at this point, in my opinion, the big problem that we have is that there is no popular movement, there's no popular grassroots initiative to counter those in power. जो बोलता है उसको वो या जेल में बंद कर देते हैं, जो सवाल उठाता है उसे वैसे ही उठा लेते हैं. And unless we are able to resist this culture of fear, we will not be able to build counter ideas that can lead to a counter movement. So I think one of the tasks in the coming months, years again, is that it's clear that those in power don't care. It's clear that not only do they not care about the people, they don't care about the constitution, about the rules of the game, but the question is, do we care about ourselves, about each other enough that we are willing to raise our voices, get together and fight back? And I think it's this question that will decide the future of Pakistan. Thank you.
I'll just take the unpopular sort of posture here, and that is that, I mean, you talked about there not being movements. There is a very robust movement. The most popular political party in the country has been slowly and steadily dismantled over the last 3.5 months. The other most popular urban movement in the country, 99% of the people in the room would be aghast at allowing them a seat at the table. But I don't see TLP on the stage, and I don't see Ammar or myself, I don't want to speak for anyone else, welcoming the TLP as some sort of grand expression of the kind of democracy that we want to have. We also had a reform. We inserted things in the Constitution in 2018, in 2010 with the 18th Amendment. We had 63 separate amendments that were made to the Constitution, covering pretty much everything that we talk about today. All of the complaints that we have today with the system not working, we had those same complaints in 1990, 91, 93, 96, 97, 99, and then from 99 all the way to 2008 until he walked away. And then through 8 and 9 and 10, we had seminars like this, including those run by parliamentarians, and in 2010 we had the 18th Amendment. And the 18th Amendment directly addresses local government and does so as robustly as we've ever done constitutionally. And the fact that we still don't have it means that there is I think an element of a waste of time for restating the same principles and the same norms over and over again. So here's what I propose. I don't mind the ISI sector commander running Lahore, but I want the ISI sector commander to be rewarded with extra plots if there is more prosperity, more equity, and more competitiveness between Lahore and other districts. And I want the ISI sector commander to be punished by maybe delaying his plot receival or by demoting him from colonel to major. And this is something that actually the institution itself is robustly committed to. Meritocracy. So for me, these procedural instruments of democracy, vote यार 4 दफा तो मेरी ये जब से मैं पाकिस्तान आया हूँ local government हो चुकी है. कराची में मजाक बना हुआ है, सिंध में, और you know, for all the good things the PPP represents, and they all, फौज भी बहुत अच्छी है और बुरे काम करती है, PPP बहुत अच्छी बुरे काम करती है, PTI बहुत अच्छी है और बुरे काम करती है, right? But the point, नहीं, May 9th was a bad thing, but you know, it excites people, that's a good thing, and it excites young people, that's a great thing. The point is that we keep getting stuck on the procedural aspect of it. ये इस तरह लिखा है, इस तरह होना चाहिए. अच्छा, इस तरह लिख के हम 4 दफ़ा कर चुके हैं 2001 के बाद से लोकल गवर्नमेंट के साथ. सिंध में 5 दफ़ा बैक एंड फोर्थ हो चुका है. जो कोर्ट आता है, हाई कोर्ट आए, सुप्रीम कोर्ट आए, उसका जजमेंट आए, लेकिन जो खिलवाड़ हो रहा है कराची के लोगों के साथ, वो आप लोगों को पता नहीं है. आप लोग लाहौर में जो है, you guys complain about Lahore, you imagine being from Karachi, man. There's like, it's a completely different sort of level of dysfunction and insecurity and poverty and TLP domination and all of those things that are scaring people. ये जो emerging challenges वाला element है, अहमद, ये बिल्कुल cover नहीं हुआ, but time is short and I've taken more than my 1 minute. Thank you.
Thank you so much to our esteemed panelists. I think to sum up, the most important thing in terms of designing representative, accountable and responsive local governments is to have elected leadership. I think elections होते हैं तो representation होती है, elections होते हैं तो accountability भी होती है. वो जो promotion और demotion है, उसका सबसे बड़ा हथियार जो है वो election है, और यही accountability फिर responsiveness को भी लीड करती है कि जब किसी DC साहब को तो पता है कि उन्होंने ان کو تو عوام اٹھا کے باہر نہیں پھینک سکتی, لیکن جب میئر یا کاؤنسلر یا چیئرمین جو ہے اس کو عوام اٹھا کے باہر پھینک سکتی ہے, اور جب یہ تلوار لٹک رہی ہوگی تو لوکل گورنمنٹ زیادہ رسپانسو ہوں گی. تھینک یو ٹو آر پینلسٹ, اور آئی تھنک وی ہیو ہم 15
Can I make a small comment? آپ یہاں پہ سول سروسز کو بہت بیکاز ان دی ایبسنس کرنا بہت آسان ہے. میں ان کو انسٹرکٹر ہوں ادھر, اور 2019 میں ہم نے اس پہ بہت کام کیا تھا لوکل گورنمنٹ پہ, پورے ہم نے سینڈیکیٹس بنائے تھے. ویسے ایک سوال ہے کہ
اس پر تیسرا پینل جو ہے وہ اسی ٹاپک پر ہے, ریفارمنگ سول سروس.
میں اس کو
اگر آپ موجود ہوں گے تو
نہیں, میں عشرت صاحب کو وہ میں نے سول سروسز میں کرایا تھا. میرا صرف ایک سوال ہے کہ رحیم یار خان جو کہ فادر موسٹ ڈسٹرکٹ ہے اس وقت اور تحصیل ہے, وہاں اگر لوکل گورنمنٹ نہیں ہے پچھلے 5-6 سال سے, تو کون ہے جو ایبسنس میں غائب, ایکسکیوز می تھوڑا, جو غائب ہو کے ISI سیکٹر کمانڈر بھی نہیں ہے وہاں پہ کام کر رہا ہے, اور جو جس کا انٹرسٹ نہیں ہے کہ وہ ایک بلوچ ٹرائب یا دوسرے بلوچ ٹرائب یا جو مائنورٹیز ہیں ان کو اگنور کر کے بھی وہ سب کو ایکول ریپرزنٹیشن دے رہا ہے. دیر از somebody out there جس کی ٹریننگ آپ کے بجٹ سے جاتی ہے, جس کی سیلریز آپ کے فیڈرل اکاؤنٹ سے جاتی ہے, فیڈرل کنسالیڈیٹڈ اکاؤنٹ سے جاتی ہے. دیر از somebody out there, اور وہ somebody ایک بہت انٹریکیٹ اور انٹرنسک پارٹ ہے. جو سول سروسز سنڈیکیٹ کرایا تھا وہ میں اسی کا سنڈیکیٹ ہیڈ تھا. اس کے جو لرننگس تھے وہ ان میں سے سب سے امپورٹنٹ ہے کہ آپ کو انڈیا کی طرف دیکھنا نہیں ہے, آپ KPK کو دیکھیں. KPK کے اندر لوکل باڈیز بہت اچھے طریقے سے افیکٹولی کام
کریں. آپ کا کامنٹ بہت اچھا ہے, لیکن یہ ضائع ہو جائے گا کیونکہ اس کے بعد سیشن آگے چلنا نہیں ہے. سو اس لیے بہتر ہوگا کہ سول سروس والے سیشن میں آپ پارٹیسپیٹ کریں. Thank you everyone. We'll do a short tea break and we'll reconvene in 5 minutes.